The pro-Brexit research group Economists for Free Trade has published a report today favouring a no-deal Brexit and trade with the EU under World Trade Organization rules. Well, lead Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg spoke at the event's launch, and he joins us now from the Palace of Westminster's central lobby. Good to talk to you, Mr Rees-Mogg. This report suggests that it will boost the UK's trade with the rest of the world, lower domestic prices, boost inward investment, raise Treasury revenues by 80 billion. These are hopes, aren't they? They are forecasts, predictions. Why do you trust these when so many other economists don't?
You're absolutely right. You ask the key question, which is that all forecasts end up not being precise. And the question is, whose forecasts have the best track record? And whereas the Treasury forecast, the 800,000 job losses from voting to leave, the recession, the emergency budget, the punishment budget, all turned out to be wrong, what Patrick Minford and Roger Bootle and Economists for Free Trade have said has consistently turned out to be more accurate. So that's why I put my faith in people who have a good track record.
I mean, we don't know if those reports will be true because we haven't left yet. Those are reports about what happens after we leave, weren't they?
No, they weren't actually. That's a mistake. This was what the Treasury said would happen purely on the basis of a vote to leave. They said increase in unemployment of up to 800,000, whereas in fact unemployment has fallen and employment has risen. It's really important that they said the psychological effect of the economy on voting to leave would be very damaging, and they were completely and utterly wrong.
You said in this meeting a short time ago, and these are your words that I'm quoting, tell me if I'm wrong, trading on World Trade Organization terms might be worse for the economy, or it might be better. That wasn't written on the side of a bus, was it?
No, it would be better because we would be free to lower tariffs on goods that we don't produce in this country, giving consumers in this country an immediate cut in prices. There are many tariffs imposed by the EU that don't protect any business that we've got in the UK, but protect continental businesses. Those can be scrapped straight away, and that would be a very powerful boost to the economy. So a world trade deal is very positive straight away.
But you don't know that, do you? I mean, your words are that it might be worse for the economy, and that wasn't something that a lot of people who voted for Brexit believed.
Who said it would be worse for the economy? The whole point of this morning's meeting was to say it would be good for the economy and that the economy would thrive on a world trade deal. And you just look at the facts that since the single market came in, the UK's trade with the rest of the world on WTO terms has grown at 3 times the rate of our trade with the European Union. Countries trading with the EU on World Trade Organization terms have seen their trade with the EU go up at 4 times the rate of that of the UK. So a world trade deal, from past experience, we know would be good for us.
Can I just ask you about comments that William Hague has made this week in The Telegraph? He's saying that Britain could face the most serious constitutional crisis for at least a century if the Chequers-based Brexit deal is blocked. And talking about those like yourselves, making categoric statements about being against Chequers or against a no deal. He says that you are loading the revolver for a game of Russian roulette with a lot more than Brexit at stake. What's your reaction?
No, I've read Lord Hague's article. I don't think he's got completely the prospect of a vote in January as the law is framed. But leaving the European Union is a very important constitutional change. That is unquestionably true, and that has been true from the point at which we've voted to leave. I don't think that's exactly news. But ensuring that we leave properly will avoid a constitutional crisis. Just think, we had the biggest vote in the nation's history. 17.4 million people vote to do something, more than have ever voted for any political party in our whole history. And then we didn't do it, and then we did Chequers and really stayed half in and half out. That would be a constitutional crisis by the bucket load.
So in 6 to 8 weeks, if a deal is done, as Michel Barnier suggests it might be, what happens if you don't like it?
Well, if it's a Chequers-based deal, when it comes to the House of Commons, I will vote against it.
But that is a deal that's representing the will of those 17 million people, as you've just said. It is a deal to take the UK out of the EU, and it's the best deal that the government thinks it can get.
Chequers doesn't take us out of the EU. It leaves us subject to the acquis communautaire, the single rule book, and would lead us subject to the European Court of Justice on goods and agri-foods. So it's not a proper Brexit at all.
But isn't that absolute supreme arrogance, if you don't mind my saying so, sir? I mean, why do you think your version of Brexit is the only version that is the right version of Brexit? When you ask people why they voted to leave the EU, you'll get a myriad of responses. You know, you'll get people who said that they voted out because of EU regulation, but that they haven't really thought about the implications for Northern Ireland. Or you'll get people who say that they voted out because of trade, but that they now don't want customs if they're getting on the Eurostar to France. So your version of Brexit isn't the only version of Brexit. You don't speak for the 17 million.
Well, I think you've got to think what out is and what in is. The people voted to leave the European Union. And of course, within how you leave, there are differences as to how you might do that. But Chequers simply doesn't take us out of the European Union. So that's not my version of Brexit or anybody else's version of Brexit. It's just not Brexit. And so the question is, do you have a particular type of trade deal? How do you deal with the Northern Ireland border? To which you're absolutely right. There will be different answers, and people didn't vote for a specific answer on that. But they did vote to leave the European Union, which Chequers fails to deliver.
We just heard the news in the last hour that Mark Carney is going to be staying on as the Governor of the Bank of England. You've been critical of him in the past. What are your feelings about the fact that he's going to steer the ship through the choppy waters of Brexit?
Well, I think it's a pity that he's played ducks and drakes with his term of appointment. It was meant to be 8 years. He said for family reason he could only do 5 years. Then he extended it. Now he's extended again. I think the governorship of the Bank of England is too important a post to have been politicised, as sadly he has done, or to be muddled about with in this way. I think it's very undignified and reflects poorly on him.
And just going back to what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 weeks, you've said that you will block the deal if it's the Chequers deal that is proposed. What about Theresa May herself? Are you going to launch a leadership challenge against her?
Well, let me just clarify. I said I'd vote against the Chequers deal. I don't know whether I have the ability to block it. It would depend on how other MPs voted. But no, my objective is to change the policy, not the person. I'm supporting the Prime Minister, who is doing her duty as she sees best. She's a very dutiful person and is keeping going in not easy circumstances and is admirable for that.
And in terms of being dutiful, speaking with you this morning was Boris Johnson. And of course, many people believe that he would like to be the next Prime Minister. You obviously put great store in a Prime Minister being dutiful, and you're also a committed Catholic. How would you feel about having somebody soon to be divorced, who appears to have had myriad affairs, being the leader of the country? And would you take a place in their cabinet?
Well, you say to me as a committed Catholic, and what is the fundamental teaching of Christianity? It is that you should not judge others. That is for a higher authority. Judge not that ye be not judged. And therefore it is not for me to judge Boris Johnson's behaviour. I'm interested in his policies, his commitment to Brexit, and his charismatic appeal to the nation.
Indeed, but you also judge a person by their behaviour, don't you? And we do expect, rightly or wrongly, those who lead our country to perhaps have a slightly better developed moral compass than the rest of us. Do you think that it's possible to be a good leader if you don't perhaps have the same moral compass in your private life?
I think you're ignoring the history of the office of Prime Minister. I mean, look at Palmerston, who was one of our most distinguished Prime Ministers. Look at the Duke of Wellington. I don't think that monk-like behaviour is a requirement for being Prime Minister.
OK. Jacob Rees-Mogg, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.